Hey guys, today we're going to make this adorable snowman with custom textures. Let's get started. Starting with a new blank Blender project, let's go ahead and delete the default cube. Press Shift and A, let's add in an icosphere. We want to use an icosphere over a UV sphere because it works a little bit better with the displace modifier, which we're going to use in a moment. Head to our modifiers tab, and we're going to add a modifier, generate, and subdivision surface. We can see that gives us a little bit of topology to work with. If your computer can handle it, let's bring that up to 5. Now I want to go ahead and apply that, and you can either use the drop down or you can hover over and then press Control and A. Now if we tab in, we see we have a lot of topology to work with, which is great when you're using displacement. Let's go ahead and right-click Shade Smooth. Now go back to our modifiers, Deform, and we want to add Displace. Let's click this New button, and then this option to jump to the Textures properties. For the type, we want to use Clouds. And Musgrave is kind of similar, but clouds can be a little bit softer, so I'm going to go with clouds personally. This first portion for the size is going to be how much lumpiness do you want. So play around with it until you have something that you like here. You go with something like that. And it looks a little funky at first, but let's head back to our modifiers properties, bring this down to a 0, and then use the right arrow to just bring this up a little bit. Now this portion is going to be how lumpy do you want your snowball to be. And the snowballs will make up the snowman, so we want to try to get this part right from the beginning. If we head to our materials preview, we can see without much effort, this is already sort of looking a little bit like snow. So we're going to do a few more things to make it look even better though. Let's go ahead and minimize this displacement, and then we can use the drop down to duplicate it. Expand this second displacement, and I want to clear that texture. Now I want to add a new texture and use that same button to get back to the texture properties. Once again, I do want to use clouds, only this time I'm going to use something that is a little bit stronger because this is going to lie on top of the lumpiness. So I might go with something like that, and then let's head back to the modifiers properties. We can bring this down to about a 0.05, and this is just going to add some additional displacement as you would see in the real world. So if you like the way this looks and you're happy with it, go ahead and press Shift and T. Let's go ahead and duplicate this. I want to press Z to keep it on the Z axis, and then I want to scale this down using S. G, Z, and then S. This is going to be the snowman head, so again, try to get it right from the beginning because it's going to be harder to make changes later. So I do want to have the connections pretty close to just being connected because this portion is going to be covered up by a scarf, and we have to leave room for the face. Once you're happy with that, press Control A, apply that scale, and you see the lumpiness changes a little bit because the scale is different. You can rotate this on the Z axis until you have whatever direction that you like. I kind of like the way mine came in right from the beginning, so I'm going to leave it like that. With the head still selected, let's go ahead and shift select the body, and then what I want to do is press Control P and keep transform. GZ, I'm going to bring this up so it's even with this X axis. So whenever I move the body now though, the head moves easily. Press Shift and A, want to add a mesh plane, and then S10. Let's go ahead and scale that up 10 times. And this is going to be our ground level. My goal here is to make the snow texture look good on other surfaces and not just the snowman, so having the visual as I'm going along is super handy for me. Let's go ahead and tab into edit mode, then right click subdivide. Now before you click anything else, notice this little menu that pops up. This only happens when you subdivide and then don't do anything else. As soon as you make one change, this menu goes away. So now's the best time to add some additional cuts without too much effort. So let's go ahead and expand this, and then we want to add 100 cuts. Tab out of edit mode. I want to Control A, let's apply the scale, and then with the plane still selected, Shift select the snowball, and now Control L, and I want to copy the modifiers. So you can see very quickly, without much effort, we already have some lumpiness on our plane, making the ground look pretty good. Let's go ahead and right-click Shade Smooth. Now let's head over to the Shading tab and just make it so that you can see the snowman and the plane at the same time. That way you can see if you need to make any adjustments as we go along. So what I'm going to do now is click this drop down. I'm going to use the default material and then just rename it as snow. And then we can move this over a little bit. We can slide this up a little bit as well, just make sure that you can see what you need to see. First thing I'm going to do is somewhere out here, press Shift and A. Let's go ahead and search for a color ramp. Once you have that, just go ahead and drop that in, connect the color right to the base color, and we can see it made it a little bit darker. I do want to change this black to something a little more light blue to just offset the snow a little bit, and something like that looks pretty good. If you notice that the snowball base looks a little better than the head and the plane right now, and that's because we're only working with this one object. So now what we have to do is click the snowball head, use the drop down, select snow immediately. That looks better, and the same thing for the plane. So now that we have this applied, we can work on just one of them and all three will show the changes at the same time. Next, what I want to do is somewhere out here, Shift and A, and let's go ahead and add a noise texture, and we can connect that right up to the color ramp. Before I make too many changes, I'm going to press Control and T, and this is going to give me 2 additional nodes, and these only come in if you have the Node Wrangler enabled. If you don't, just come up to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, start typing the word node, and you see Node Wrangler on mine is enabled. Do the same on yours, and then go ahead and close this box. What I want to do here is just connect the object to the vector. That's going to make everything look a tiny bit better. So you see right away we get some additional detail. What we can do now is play with the noise texture. For my noise texture, I'm going to bring the detail all the way up, and I'm going to set the scale to something really high, like 2000. And for distortion, I'm going to bring this up to about a 1.7. And you can't see it until you get really close, but it's just an additional layer of detail there. What I want to do now is go ahead and duplicate this noise texture by pressing Shift and D. And we can move this down. And I'm going to hit the backspace just to clear all of those settings back to default. Next, I'll want a bump node. So press Shift and A. Let's look for a bump node. And we're going to drop this here, connect the noise texture to the height, and connect the normal to the normal. So we can see we have a little bit of weird lumpiness. I also want to come to my material properties, scroll all the way down to the settings, and where we see displacement bump only, I want displacement and bump. So we can see that changed a little bit. Because this still looks a little funky, I'm going to bring this down to about a 0.1. But if you play with this, you can see the impact it's having. And while it's still pretty strong, if I come across, you can see that it's adding another layer of detail on top of the current layer. So that just makes the snow look a little bit more realistic, but what we can see is while it looks good for the ground, it's not looking so great for our snowman. Let's go ahead and reduce this to a 0.1, which makes both of them look a little bit better. And for the scale, I'm going to go ahead and set this to something really high, like 1000. And this is just for some fine detail on top of the snow. This looks pretty good. We can still make it look a little bit better, even in Eevee. If we come up to our render properties, tick this ray tracing, it makes everything look a little bit better. So what we can see is we already have a pretty decent looking foundation for our snow material. If we add a camera in and then press F12, you get a better idea that is looking pretty good for both the snowman and the ground. For a little bit more detail, what we can do is duplicate these two. And then for the noise texture, let's go ahead and hit backspace on that to clear the previous settings. And then we're going to want to mix these two. So press Shift and A, and let's add a mix color. Mine came right up because I use it a lot, but yours, you may have to type a little bit more. So I'm going to connect the first one to the A slot and then the second one to the B slot. So for the second one, we can add even more detail, but if we change this to something like multiply or even better, linear light, we can see we have a little bit more detail, and we can just keep bringing this in. This is going to be personal preference of how much extra little fine detail do you want. So I'm going to bring mine pretty high, so it's about 1,000. And then what you can do is just play with these individual settings until you have something that you like. And then also for this one, I can bring the strength up until it meets the needs that I'm looking for. I'm kind of liking it's close to a 0.5, so let's go ahead and even that up. Just keep taking a look at the render to see how it's looking. So another thing that we can do is come back to our principal BSDF, and we can bring down the roughness. And snow's not 100% shiny, so I might do something like a 0.1. We can also play around with our light. I'm going to turn this into a sun, and then set it to about a 10, and then just have it point somewhere towards the snowman. So now if I come up here and tick the scene world and scene light, you can see kind of what we're going to see on our final render. So we can make this look even better. We can bring in an HDRI. So we're going to click on the world properties, color, and then environment texture. From there, navigate to wherever you saved your HDRI, and then you can bring that in. You can see that makes it look pretty good as well. What we can do is come up to our render properties, scroll down to film, and make that transparent so we get rid of that image. But we can see that this already looks a little bit better. So I feel like the ground is not looking quite as soft as I would like it to look. So if you're having a similar issue, what you might do is bring down some of these settings. And also, if you bring the detail up on both of your noise textures connected to the bump, that's going to help as well. And then another thing that we can do to make the noise textures look a little bit better is connect the texture coordinate object to each of these vectors. So you can see that's going to make it look a lot nicer as well. So that's the final thing that makes this look a lot like snow. So if we look at our preview, we can see that's looking really good. We can still make this look a tiny bit better by coming back to our principal BSDF, setting the subsurface weight to about a 0.3. It's just going to make it a little bit more reflective and shiny. And then for specular, I'm going to make sure that the tint is set to white. And you can see from my hex value that mine is. If yours isn't all Fs, then go ahead and make any adjustments. Now if we take another quick preview, we can see that that's looking pretty good. So now we have all of that, let's head back to our layout tab, and I'm going to press 1 for front orthographic view just so I know where I am. Now what I want to do is press Shift and A. I'm going to add a mesh circle, and notice that submenu that comes up. I'm going to leave my vertices to 32, but if you don't make adjustments now, you do anything else, this menu goes away. And the way to get it back is by starting over, or at least that's been my experience. I'm going to press G and Z, and I'm just going to bring it to around where the shoulder area would be. And you can press the 1 on your numpad or snap to front orthographic by using the -Y. Now what I want to do is press S to scale it down, and I want it scaled so it's just about touching but not blading through. So make sure you look at your object from all sides. So notice right there mine starts to clip, and what I'm going to do is just bring that back out, and then I'll use proportional editing when we give our scarf some character to make any adjustments. Tab into edit mode, EZ, and I'm just going to bring this up a little bit. S to scale it in, EZ, bring it up a tiny bit more, EZ, and then EZ one more time, and this time I'm going to scale it out. Now we can tab back out of edit mode, right click shade smooth, and we see that we have a pretty good beginning base scarf. I'm going to add a modifier to give this some thickness. So we're going to come here, generate, and we want solidify. I'm going to use a 0.05 just because I want my snowman to be warm, but not too warm. We can also press the Ctrl+2 shortcut or just add another modifier to give it a subdivision surface at 2 levels. Now what I want to do is go ahead and press Shift and D. We're going to duplicate this, and I'm going to scale it slightly, and then GZ just to move it up some. This is just going to be a little inside level of my scarf. I'm going to, while that's still selected, hit the / to isolate this. And also I want to tab into edit mode. And then for the solidify, I'm going to tick this on cage icon. And that's going to let me see my vertices on both sides. Now I can select this bottom edge and either I can scale it down or I can just remove it. So I think I'm going to scale it down just so I retain the topology, but you can't see it too well, which is exactly what I want. I'm going to hit that front orthographic view again, just so I know where I am. And I'm going to select a few vertices and then isolate this inside again. Pivot so I'm on the inside here and I want 4 vertices. And then I'm going to hit E and Y just to bring it out a little bit. EZ, bring it up, GY, keep it kind of close, EZ, GY. And I'm just going to do this all the way up, EZ, last time here. And then GY just to bring it a little bit closer, and then bring it down just a little bit more, GZ, bring it back down a little bit, and then EY, and I'm going to start to hook this over. I'm going to hit that / to come back out of that isolated mode, and then I'm going to press EZ to start bringing this down. Don't worry that it's not touching. We're going to fix that with proportional editing. And then just for now, what you want to do is just keep moving your scarf edge down, EZ, and then GY as many times as you need to so that it makes sense for your scarf. EZ, and don't worry that it's clipping, GY, so we're just going to bring that out, EZ, and then GY. And I might add another loop cut right there, and then G. And again, we're going to fix some of this with proportional editing, so don't worry too much about that. So that's looking pretty good for the first side of the scarf. And what we can do is tab back into edit mode. We can use these same vertices. I'm going to click this one, control click this one, and then EY, EZ, and then just bring this up again, GY, and then EZ, GY. And I'm just going to bring a second one. So I want to move some of this over. Let's go ahead and do that now. So we're going to hit this O for proportional editing. But I also want to come up here to the little drop down for the fall off, and I want to tick this connected only. If I don't have that connected when I'm using proportional editing, then any objects that are in edit mode, so right now anything in the circle of influence is impacted. But if I have this fall off enabled for connected only, now when I move, only the connected objects in the circle of influence are impacted. So what I want to do here is go ahead and hit G and X and just start moving this over a little bit. And I can increase that area of influence as much as I need to. So I'm going to do something like that. And then we can also bring this out a little bit and then turn proportional editing back off. Let's continue to bring our scarf edge down so that it's in front of the snowman as well. Easy. This a little bit more, GY, and then I want these overlapping just ever so slightly. Easy, and then now EY, and I'm going to start to bring this over, and then EZ, and we can fix some of this with proportional editing, but continue to move it out if you need to. So what I want to do now is just finish bringing this out, and you can pause the video and do the same thing. I'll meet you back here in a moment. Go around and move the 2 edges of the scarf so that we're giving our scarf a little bit of character. Select and click this bottom edge and then G, X, and just move this over a little bit so it has a little bit of a windblown look. I do want them to be a little bit uneven so that one's a little bit longer than the other, and then just move it around, giving your scarf a tiny bit of character. This will also be the time where we can bring some of these edges a little bit closer. Something like that. We can also add another loop cut in here if we want to, and then just grab this edge, G, reduce that area of influence, and we can bring this up a little bit so it's got a little bit more character, but do watch for clipping into the snowman face. So like this one obviously needs to come out, something like that, just so we have some good separation there. So pause the video, give your scarf some character, and I'll meet you back here in a second. That's looking pretty good, but I can see that I've made the edges less thick than the scarf itself. So I'm going to tab into edit mode. What I can do is press this edge here and then control click this edge and then just move this over a little bit so it's a little bit wider. Now I can do the same thing over here and it just looks a little bit closer to being part of the same scarf. And again, make any adjustments you need to. I think that looks pretty good. What we can do now is go ahead and join these parts. So I've got the inside selected. I want to shift select the outside. Press Ctrl J and those objects are now joined. So what we want to do is tab into edit mode. Let's make sure that we re-enable that one cage so that we can see the vertices on both sides. Make sure that you still have your connected only for the fall off. And now just go around your scarf, giving it some character so that it looks like you wrapped it around your snowman. Pause the video. I'll meet you back here in just a moment. So that looks pretty good. What you can do now is select your scarf, GZ, just move it down ever so slightly, and then tab back into edit mode. If you have too much separation, you can just roll the area of influence so that it gets a little bit closer. But for this one, I do want to disable the connected only because I want to be able to move both parts of the scarf so that it gets close, but that doesn't have too much separation. Re-enable connected if you need to for any areas. Just make sure that you don't end up clipping the inside of the scarf with the outside of the scarf. So that looks good for mine. I hope yours was coming along nicely as well. And what we can do now is head over to the shading tab. Let's go ahead and click new for a new material. We'll call this scarf. Let's go ahead and press Shift and A to add a color ramp. Just drop that right there, connect it to the base color, and now I want a noise texture. I'm going to connect the noise texture to the scarf. So we can see right away that's coming in with some black and white. I do actually want to bring these over a little bit, and I'm going to have more white than the black. A little bit of black in there like that, and then I want to flip these. And for the white color, I want to use something a little more holiday-ish, and then we can bring this down a little bit. I'm going to bring the detail up quite a bit, bring the scale down a little bit. And this part here is personal preference because you can see as I'm moving it along, it's giving a different pattern here. Bring the distortion up to about a 0.3, and that's just going to add a little bit more noise. I do want to bring the roughness all the way up, and you see that gives us that last little bit. And then once you have the roughness all the way up, play around with the scale more until you have something that you like here. And also play around with your red versus black colors here. So now that you have that in there, you can add a little bit more black texture. It just makes it look a little bit nicer. So what we can do here is bring our roughness up to about a 0.9. If you want it to be exact, you can type that in as well. And already that's kind of looking like a fuzzy little scarf, even though we don't have any bump in there. So on that note, let's go ahead and press Shift and D and backspace to reset our noise texture. Press Shift and A, we're going to add a bump node and connect the bump to the normal, and then the noise texture to the height of the bump node. And then I'm going to bring this scale down to something like a 0.1, and I'm going to bring the noise up to about 1,000. So you can see if you get close, we have the detail in there, just making it look a little bit more like fabric. We can add a little bit of subsurface, maybe do a 0.1 or a 0.2. Personal preference here. And then for my specular, I'm going to do the same thing and just make sure that tint is on all white, and then that's looking pretty good. So if we do a quick screenshot, we can see that's looking quite nice compared to the snow. I did try some checkered patterns for the scarf, but it was a bit much for the eye to take in at this close level. So what you can do if you want a pattern in there is just kind of manually add a loop cut, bevel it, and then add a pattern in. So next what I want to do is head back to the layout tab. Let's go ahead and press Shift and A. I want to add a mesh UV sphere this time. GZ, let's move this up. S to scale it down. We want it just around the size of the head for the snowman. Go ahead and hit the N key. And if you have an edit menu and auto mirror, we can auto mirror this option. If you don't have it, click on Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and start typing mirror. And you see this auto mirror add-on. Go ahead and tick that and then close this box. So what I want to do is auto mirror the Z positive. If you notice the gizmo here, auto mirror that Z positive and then go ahead and delete it. So that very quickly gives us a little shape on the head. If you want to see what it's going to look like as we go along, go ahead and give it that scarf material. Right click, shade smooth. And now we can continue in the layout tab, just giving our hat some more shape. I'm going to do GZ just to move this up a little bit more and then S to scale it so it fits kind of nice. It doesn't look great just yet, but we're going to make some changes so that it does. I'm going to tab into edit mode, go to 3 for face select, and then I'm going to select 2 of these bottom rows here. I want to press Alt and E and extrude faces along normals, and then I just want to bring this out. And the thickness is going to be personal preference here because this is going to be basically like when you fold a hat over, that's what we're going for here. So what I want to do now is press plus on my numpad. And if you don't have a numpad, you could just use Shift and manually select that. And I head over to my material properties, add a plus here, and give a new material. We're just going to call this green and assign that. For now, these are white, but we're going to assign a color. If you want to see what the color might look like, you can go ahead and assign a base color of green. And then when you click away, you can see that green there. So this is just to make it look a little bit holiday-ish, but you could certainly use a different color. And the reason to assign it is because now it's nice and easy. Say you wanted something blue, maybe blue's a little bit more holiday-ish for you, then you can make this any color that you like. So we could do a light green, we could do a light blue. I kind of like the way the light blue looks, so I might go with something like that. So now what I want to do is fix this so it looks like it has a little bit of separation. Let's tab into edit mode. 2 for edge select. I want to press Alt and select this edge, although we can't tell right now, so you can either hit Alt and Z for X-ray mode, which lets you see what we're doing there, or you can go into wireframe mode. So what I want to do is press Control B and just bevel that edge ever so slightly. And you can press the Shift key if you need to, just for a little bit more control. Now I'm going to press E and Z and make sure that the Z is there. Let's scale that a little bit just so it's a little bit closer to the edge there. GZ if you need to move it down and scale it. And the whole purpose here is just to make it look like we have that fold in a hat for that little bit of separation. O for proportional editing, and then make sure connected is not enabled. And I want to select some various parts of the hat here. And then GZ, let's go ahead and move this up a little bit. I'm going to start adding some character just by moving parts of the hat around. And I don't want it to be uniform, which is why I didn't use auto mirror. Click around, give some character. You can turn off X-ray mode if you need to, if you keep clicking through your model. All right, so now we're getting a little bit more character to our hat. It's looking pretty good. And also what I want to do is move these portions of the hat a little bit closer. So that is looking pretty good as far as the hat goes. What we can do is fix up this edge here because it's looking a little funny next to the what looks like a fuzzy hat. So let's head back to the shading tab. And all I want to do is go to slot 1 for the scarf. I want to collect all of this by just box selecting. Control C to copy that, head back to the second slot, Control V and just paste that in. And we can go ahead and move this over here. And if you need to, before you make that connection, you can click on this red side and then drop this color right in, then make the connection. So it makes a little bit more sense. Now you can see our hat's looking a little bit better. And this is going to be the area where you can play around with it if you want green, if you want blue, something a little in the grayish area, like what the big guy wears. You can bring down the white a little bit if you need to, and that's looking pretty good. Now what I want to do, just for a little bit more character on the hat, I'm going to go ahead and grab this edge here so we can Alt select. And if you want to make it a little bit easier, you can do edge select. I'm going to Shift and Alt select here. Same thing, Shift and Alt select here. And one more time, Shift and Alt select here. Actually, we got one more loop, so why not? You just have to get a little bit closer because you want to make sure that you click somewhere in the middle there. And then what we can do is press Control B and just bevel this ever so slightly. And then go back to our material properties, and where we can always rename that. For now, mine's called green. Just click on Assign there, and you see that we can add some stripes to the hat. That's really going to be personal preference. But I know sometimes when you buy something like a hat set, the hat is a little bit different than the scarf. If you really wanted to add pattern into your scarf, you can do the same thing. Come back into the scarf, Alt select, and then come over here, pick one, Shift Alt select, and then for this outside, because we would have to make that look similar, Alt select there, Control B. Let's bevel that just the tiniest little bit, and then for the scarf, we'll have to assign the green, and then go ahead and assign that. So you can see we have a little bit of a pattern that matches our hat set. You could also be clever and just come down here to one of these edges, Shift Alt select this one, Control B, and then maybe assign that as well. This is really personal preference. Just a matter of what do you want your scarf set to look like. So let's head back to layout mode. And what I want to do is press Shift and A, add a UV sphere, GZ, scale this way down, GZ, and I'm going to put this on top of the head, somewhere in the middle of the hat. Scale this way down, right click Shade Smooth. And then we can add the green material and then head over here to the particles. I'm going to add a new particle system using hair. And then we're going to scale this way down. 0.08 looks kind of nice. So what I want to do is come here to children, and I'm going to do interpolated. Display amount is only 10, but I want to see what it's going to look like. So I think 100 is too much. I kind of like the way the 10 looked. We could even do 20 here, and then the render amount, because I like the way that's looking, I'm going to make that 20 as well. For the length, we can leave that as 1. For the threshold, we can bring that up a little bit. And for the roughness, I want to come in here for the random and just kind of randomize this a little bit. Same thing for the size. I'm just going to play around till I have something that I like here. And threshold, same thing. Just kind of click around and move the slider until you see something that you like. All right, so I kind of like the way that looks. Seems a little big. I'm going to scale that down a little bit more. And I want to try to line it up with the center of the hat. And I'm just going to slide this down a little bit. So then what I can do is come into the hat, make any changes that I need to. And there we have a fuzzy little ball on the end of our hat. So for mine, this is personal preference, but I'm going to move the face area up a little bit and then just have to move it back a little bit. And I also want to tab out and parent the fuzzy ball to the hat, but first thing we have to apply that scale. Just scale it down a little bit more if we need to. And then for the hair length, 0.4, bring that down a little bit more. Okay, so once you have that where you like it, go ahead and apply that scale again, and then do the same thing for the hat. So I don't recall if we did that. And we're going to click the fuzzy ball. We're going to shift click the hat, press Control P, and keep transform. Go ahead and add an icosphere. Scale this way down, GZ. I'm going to bring this up GY. Let's scale this way down. GZ. These going to be the eyes. GX. SY. Just to kind of scale those down a little bit. RZ. Something like that. And then GY. Just to bring these out. And we can rotate them so that it makes sense. SY. GY. And I just want to make it so they're fitting somewhere flat in there. G and Z. This is supposed to be coal, so just making it look like an odd shape. Press Control and A. Let's go ahead and apply that scale. Come here to the material. We're going to call this coal. We're going to make this in close to black. And I want to bring that roughness straight up to a 0.9, close to a full 1, but not quite. I want to come back to my modifiers, add a modifier, generate and mirror. And we want to use the head here as the object to mirror. GZ if we need to. Bring those up a little bit. And then RX if you need to. So just kind of play around with it until your coal eyes make sense. So I like the way that looks. Like the eyes, I want to press Shift and S, and then I want the cursor to selected. Or Shift and A, add a mesh icosphere again. Scale this way down. This is going to be for the mouth. It was just a good, easy way for a starting point. GZ, bring this down. GX, bring this over. GX, I'm going to start somewhere in the middle. GY, bring it out. Let's scale this way down. And I'm going to go ahead and apply the coal material, so that is sharing that. GY, I'm just going to bring this out. I do want it to look like it's connecting from the side, so GX just a touch more so it's off center, and then I want to add a mirror modifier, and the mirror is going to be on the head again. So then this is going to make it nice and easy. Alt and Z, X, G, Z, and then we do want this touching, so GY, and then Alt and Z, X, GZ, and then GY. SY, just so we can bring these out a little bit more. GY, same thing with these. GY, bring them out a little bit more so they make sense. They should be intersecting on both sides. G and Y, move those in a little bit. So that's looking pretty good for the smile. Same thing for the starting point. I want to press Shift and A. Let's go with a mesh cube. S to scale this way down. GX, GZ. Let's make sure that's somewhere close to the middle. Control 2 right off the bat, GY, and just kind of bring this out a little bit. And then tab into edit mode, 3 for face select, and this is going to be our classic nose. So I wanted to use the slightly side view, but not quite. EY, bring this out a little bit, turn off proportional editing, scale this down a little bit, EY, S to scale this down, and then I'm going to add another loop cut here, turn proportional editing back on, G, and roll that area of influence. I'm just going to add a tiny bit of wonkiness, because we all know that carrots can sometimes grow a little silly. Let's go to the material properties, and we're going to add a new material. We'll call this carrot. I'm going to give this a base color of something orange. I do want to shade this smooth, and we can add in some roughness. Go ahead and bring that roughness way up. Tab back into edit mode. For this front face here, turn off proportional editing. I'm going to scale this all the way down so it's pretty close here, and then something like that. So I want to tab out of edit mode, apply this modifier by hovering over and pressing Control and A, and then let's head back to the shader tab. First thing we want to do here is add a color ramp. For the white color, let's go ahead and just drop this color in and then connect the color ramp to the base color. Go ahead and add a noise texture. Next to that, we're going to add a bump node, then connect the noise texture to the height of the bump and the bump to the normal of the principal BSTF. We can see right away that this is too much, so let's bring this down to a 0.1, and we're just going to get a little bit of bump and texture here. We can bring the roughness either all the way up or all the way down. I kind of like all the way up. For the detail, I'm going to set mine at about a 3.8. And for the scale, it depends on how rough you want this to be, but I'm going to set mine at about a 13.3. It's just going to add in a little bit of noise to our carrot. Now what I want to do is add in a Voronoi texture. I'm going to bring that down here. I'm going to duplicate this bump and then connect the distance to the height, and then I'll need a mix node. We're going to use the mix color here. We drop that right next to that and then connect this second bump to the B value. So we can leave it as something like that. It's just going to add a little bit of texture. And for this one, if you want to bring it up or down, it depends on how much detail you want. I'm going to bring the detail up to 15. I'm going to leave the roughness all the way down because I feel like this is giving it sort of a skinned carrot look. It's kind of funny, but you know, maybe somebody does it. And for the strength here, mine was set to about a 0.13. So we can leave it as something like that. Now I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to grab one of these edges this way. I'm going to turn off proportional editing for the moment, and I'm just going to scale that down ever so slightly. Same thing, grab another edge, scale it so it's a little less uniform, and then we can grab this one back here and scale that as well. And that just adds a little bit of variation as well. Then if we tab back into edit mode, we can put proportional editing back on and then just kind of give it a tiny bit more character. Most carrots aren't perfectly straight, so you can have one going up and one going over. It's really personal preference of how you want to do this. I'm going to tab into edit mode, this time /. I'm going to grab this end vertice and then GY and just roll that area of influence. I just want that to be a little bit flat. We can add a little bit of noise here if we want to as well. We can duplicate this, bring it up, connect it to our color ramp here, and then let that think for a moment. We can hit the backspace to reset these values, and then we can bring them up or down just so it makes sense. I want to bring the detail all the way up, and I bring up the roughness just a bit. We'll just do an even 0.6, and then I don't want any distortion. And that's just going to add some color variation as though the carrot was skinned and now it's starting to deteriorate. I kind of like that for the carrot. I'm going to go ahead and call that finished. For the coal, let's go ahead and start working on that. Add a color ramp right in. For the white color, let's go ahead and drop this black color in, and then I'm just going to bring these values in just a touch. I do want to add a noise texture here as well, and I do like that variation when we have that noise texture, so it's not like a flat black color. This one's going to be a little bit harder to see, but we can have that variety in there, so you have to get kind of close to see this, and we can bring this lighter coal color down a little bit so we can see the black coming through. So we can see we have a little bit of variety there. Now we can head back to the Layout tab. I'm going to press Shift and C, which resets my cursor to the center of the world. Press Shift and A, I'm going to add a mesh cube. S to scale this way down, GZ. Let's bring this over, GX. I'm going to bring this over here, Control 2. This is going to be a branch for the arms. GZ, we'll have to move this down so it's below the scarf. Tab into edit mode, 3 for face select, and then we can extrude out. Let's scale this, turn off proportional editing, EX, and let's go ahead and bring this out some more. I'm going to add another loop cut here, and then I'm going to grab this face, E, and just kind of bring this up. I'm going to add a loop cut down here so that it comes across a little nicer. 3 for face select, let's scale this down, R, rotate this, E, rotate it some more, E some more, and then scale it down. EX a little bit more, and then I'll scale this one down. I kind of like the way that looks. I'm going to shade this smooth. Tab back into edit mode. Let's add a loop cut here, and then I want to grab this face here, come back out, and then EX, and just bring that so it goes more into the body. And just make sure you don't have clipping with the scarf. GZ, move it down if you need to. And then we can add a material. I'm just going to add a base material now. We'll call it wood. Just give it like a brownish color. This is usually going to be like an orangish and then come down to a brown until you have something that is a base color. And for the roughness, I'm just going to go with a 0.9. And then we're going to add some variation in later, but that will do for now. And then I want to repeat the same thing on the other side. So pause the video. I'll meet you back here in just a second. All right, so I'm going to call that done. And I just wanted to give a little bit of variation on that second side. Let's go ahead back to the shading tab. We're already in the wood material that we've started, but let's add some variation to give it some character. I'm going to start by adding a color ramp. Just drop this right here in the center. For the white color, I'm going to steal that brown color. I'm going to bring this black over a little bit and add a new color slot and then drag the brown in again. And for this side, I'm just going to bring this down so it's a darker brown. Let's go ahead and connect that. We see it changes quite a bit. I do want it to be the lighter brown color, so I'm just going to grab this little handle and slide that over. I want to slide the darker brown handle over a little bit as well. So that's going to be the starting point, and then I might tweak these later. So yours don't have to match exactly. Your model is going to be slightly different than mine, so your values will be slightly different as well. Let's go ahead and add a noise texture in. I'm going to connect the noise texture right to the color ramp. So we can see right away that gives us a little bit of variation, but I want to try to control it a little bit. So what I want to do here is press Ctrl-T. I want to get the 2 extra node wrangler texture coordinate and mapping in. I want to select the object and connect that to the vector. And then I'm going to play around with the X, Y, and Z so that it makes sense. X will start with about 3.5, and for Y, we can bring that up. Let's just leave it there for the moment. Mine's at 27. And then for the Z, I'm just going to bring the Z up pretty high, and you might want to get a little bit closer. I'm trying to get the vertical. If you didn't already, let's go ahead and make sure that you've applied the scale to both of your branch arms here. Now what I want to do is in the space down here, let's go ahead and add a bump node. And I'm going to move this color over, connect the color to the height, and then the normal to the normal. And you can see that's going to give me a little bit of a bumpy sort of branch-like texture. So I want to get pretty close here. I'm going to leave the strength all the way up to 1. I do want to play around with the noise texture values now. So let's go ahead and play around with these so that they make sense. I'm going to bring my detail up about halfway. We'll do a 5. I do want to bring the roughness up. So the roughness is going to be personal preference, like how bumpy or scratchy do you want your branch to be? So you can see now where the darker colors make sense. So as we have this, we can sort of play around with these values now and just slide them around until you have something that you really like. So I like that there just before it starts to bleed through. And that is looking pretty good as far as the branch material. So let's check this guy out over here because we were focused on the first one. I like the way those look. Personal preference on this part, so play around until you have something that you like. I do want to check out to see if I want to make one more change to the scarf, and that is going to be to grab this edge here. We'll just add a bevel and then assign what's still called green on mine, just to see if we like that. I kind of do, so personal preference if you want that extra loop in there, but I sort of like the way that looks. And I can actually rename this green to more of a grayish now, so that makes sense if you see it later and it's renamed. It looks like also my arms might be uneven. That's probably normal for what a human would do. Geez, see, we can move this up a little bit. Next step's going to be to add some animation. You can go back and rename all of your collection here. I didn't rename as I went, but I'll clean that up in just a moment. I won't bore you with that. But this is going to do it for the first part of modeling my snowman.